everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at supplier risk management.
Okay.
Specifically, we're going to be focusing on cybersecurity.
Right.
So we've got a sales presentation from Cyberangels, and they're talking about their TPRM solution.
Okay.
And we also have some statistics about cybersecurity and kind of how it relates to small, medium enterprises.
Right.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll totally get why this is such a big issue for companies today.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I think a lot of companies, they spend so much time building up their defenses. They have all this great cybersecurity around their data, and then they kind of forget about the supply chain.
Right.
And it's like having the best lock on your front door,
Right.
but leaving the back window wide open.
That's a great analogy because it's you can have all the best stuff internally, and then if just one of your suppliers isn't up to par,
Right.
it's all kind of for nothing, right? So I thought Cyberangels had this really interesting stat. I'll just jump right into it.
Sure.
They said that 74% of companies have experienced some kind of cybersecurity incident because of overly permissive access that was given to a third party.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Security Magazine, they kind of backed this up.
Okay.
And they were saying that it gets even more interesting when you realize that 90% of a large company's suppliers are actually small to medium enterprises or SMEs.
Right. So it's not just like the big guys that they're working with.
Oh, right.
You have this whole chain, this whole network.
Exactly.
Wow.
So then it begs the question of how many of these SMEs are actually prepared for a cyber attack?
Yeah. That's the question, isn't it? And the numbers are kind of scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
CNBC and SurveyMonkey actually did some research and found that 53% of SMEs, so over half, don't even have a plan in place for a cyber attack.
Oh, wow.
And a whopping 64% don't even think it's that big of a deal.
It's kind of like playing with fire, almost.
It is.
Because you just don't know when it's going to happen. And then
Yes.
if you're not prepared, it could be really bad.
Yeah.
And to make things even worse, DigitalOcean and Corvus Insurance, they found that 47% of SMEs have zero cybersecurity budget.
Oh, wow.
They're not even allocating any resources to this.
Because they probably think it's too expensive or something.
Yeah, they think it's too expensive.
Well,
they don't think it's a big deal. So it's like, what can you do? But it's obviously an issue.
It is a huge issue. And, it's funny because you would think it would be a big business problem.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's an ecosystem problem.
Right.
Because if one of those small businesses, if something happens to them,
Right.
it affects everybody that they work with.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that brings us to what we call third-party risk, or TPR.
Okay.
And TPR, it really encompasses any risk that a supplier, no matter how small, introduces into your business environment.
So even if you are that digital Fort Knox, if you have one weak link in the chain,
It kind of opens everything up, right?
Exactly. And the EU is really starting to crack down on this with this new NIS2 directive.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and essentially what they're doing is they're saying that management is now directly responsible for any sort of non-compliance with supplier risk obligations.
Oh, wow.
So this isn't something that they can just kind of sweep under the rug and say, oh, it wasn't us.
Right.
They're going to be held accountable.
Interesting.
And if things go sideways, we're talking about potentially some hefty fines here.
Wow. So they're really serious about it.
They are. This is a big deal.
Wow. So you're saying that companies are responsible, management's responsible, but then there's also, Corvus Insurance did a study and they found that 91% of California Dental Association members had a really hard time even interpreting a basic cyber risk report.
Oh, wow.
So how are you supposed to be responsible if you can't even understand the information? That's the thing. And that's why this whole TPRM process is so crucial. And Cyberangels, I think they do a good job of really highlighting this. It's not just a one-time fix.
Right.
This is a continuous journey that you need to integrate throughout every single vendor relationship that you have.
Right. So you're saying bake it into the process.
Exactly.
From day one.
From day one.
So how do you do that? What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, Cyberangels, they break it down into 3 different stages. And this really mirrors those NIS2 requirements.
Okay.
So first, you have sourcing and onboarding, right?
Yeah.
This means you're being very selective from the get-go about who you're even going to work with.
Right.
You're picking vendors that already meet your risk standards.
Okay.
The second stage is continuous monitoring and management.
Okay.
So you've got to keep an eye on how they're doing, if anything's changed, if their risk level's gone up.
Right.
And then finally, there's secure offboarding. So even when you're done working with a vendor, you need to make sure that the data is handled properly.
Right.
You don't want any of that leaking out.
Yeah, so you're saying this is a full life cycle.
Exactly.
It's not just when they're actively working, it's before, during, after.
Exactly. But traditionally, companies have really, really struggled with this whole TPRM thing.
Yeah, and why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because it can be complex. It can be overwhelming.
Right.
Cyberangels outlines some of these challenges within their, three-stage framework.
Okay.
They said, even in that initial selection and onboarding phase,
Yeah.
you're often working with very limited information.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really know what their security practices are.
Right.
A lot of times, different teams within your own company are siloed,
Right.
so they're not talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the reliance on spreadsheets.
Oh, the dreaded spreadsheet.
It never goes away.
Spreadsheets for risk management. Come on.
I know, but it's more common than you think.
Yeah, I know. It's true. It's like that's the go-to tool.
It is, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then that reliance on spreadsheets kind of spills over into that continuous monitoring and management phase.
Right.
And when you couple that with disjointed tools, inefficient processes, everything's manual.
Mm-hmm.
It's no wonder companies feel completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, and then by the time you get to that third phase, you're just
Right.
so over it.
Right. And then you have, those siloed teams again. You have the manual processes. There's no real consistent tracking.
Right.
And there's no real way to make sure that the contract is even being upheld on the security front.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So it becomes this very messy situation.
Right. It's just a recipe for disaster almost.
It is.
And you were talking about some of those points that Cyberangel specifically mentioned.
Right.
So they were saying that, a lot of these companies are still relying on those self-reported questionnaires.
Yep.
Often in, you guessed it, Excel. So, and then you're relying on this information that you're getting from the supplier.
Right. And it's not always accurate.
Right, exactly. So it's like, how reliable is that? And then on top of that, the procurement team and the IT security teams, they're not even talking to each other a lot of the time.
Right.
They're working in silos.
It's like two ships passing in the night.
Exactly.
Right.
And because that data is often static, it's not dynamic.
Right.
There's no way to have these automatic checks or alerts if something goes wrong.
Exactly.
You're just kind of blindly trusting.
It's very reactive instead of proactive.
Exactly. And then that forces companies into these like really expensive one-off assessments.
Right.
And they can only even do those on a small number of their suppliers.
Right.
So it's not even comprehensive.
It's not even the full picture.
It's not even the tip of the iceberg, probably.
Right.
So it's a mess. But that's where Cyberangels is like
Right.
presenting their solution.
Yes, exactly.
So maybe they have the answer.
Maybe they do.
We'll see.
We'll see.
How
So
does-
they saw all this mess and they're like, we have a solution for you.
Right. Like, thank goodness. Somebody please help.
Exactly.
So they're saying that their platform is this sauce solution.
Okay.
And it's aimed at kind of taming this whole cybersecurity beast, right?
Yeah.
The risk, the compliance, the vendor audits.
Right. Right. Because it is a beast.
It is a beast.
Yeah.
And they're all about simplifying it, which I love.
Of course, who isn't?
Give you that visibility back and save you money.
All the things that everybody wants. But how do they actually do that? What does that look like in the real world?
So their platform, they have supplier tracking and risk assessment,
Yes.
questionnaires, external vulnerability scans,
Okay.
customizable templates. I mean, they really seem to have it all.
And they even have like AI-generated remediation plans.
Yeah, right.
APIs for integration. They're going all out.
Yeah, and they really emphasize that proactive approach, which I think is key.
Right.
Because if you're just reacting all the time, it's exhausting.
Exactly. You're already behind.
You're already behind. And they also talk about being collaborative, being transparent, which I appreciate,
Yeah.
because they're trying to bring procurement, IT security, internal audit, external audit, all those different functions together.
Yeah, because usually they're very siloed.
They are so siloed.
And that's usually where things fall apart, is the communication between those teams.
Right, exactly. So how does this platform actually work?
Yeah, I'm curious. They have that whole three-stage life cycle thing. How does it fit into that?
So they walk you through it, which is really helpful.
Okay.
So in that selection and onboarding phase, they actually automate supplier evaluation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they're using internal, external questionnaires. They even have scans that will like pull in data from systems you're already using.
Okay.
So if you're using SAP Ariba, ServiceNow, all that, it can integrate with that. And it looks at your existing archives too.
Wow. That's handy.
Yeah, so it's really trying to get the full picture.
Right.
And then in the continuous monitoring and management phase, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because the platform knows, okay, this supplier's high risk, this one's low risk, based on all those factors.
Right. It's not just a guessing game.
No, it's looking at how they benchmark against other companies in their industry.
Right. Are they an outlier or are they
Exactly.
kind of middle of the road?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's looking for compliance gaps. It's even looking at historical data and trends.
So it's learning over time.
It's learning over time, which is cool.
That's impressive. What about that last stage, the insure and trust?
So that's where they have all those collaboration tools.
Okay.
They have supplier access. They have those AI-generated remediation plans, which is cool.
Very cool.
A shared activity program.
Okay.
Progress monitoring, and then they even have options for third-party services.
Wow, so they really thought of everything.
Yeah, so they're really trying to create this very dynamic system where everyone can work together and you're not just pointing fingers.
Right, it's a team effort.
Exactly. And remember those pain points we talked about earlier?
Yeah, the questionnaires, the silos, all that.
They actually address those head-on, which I was impressed by.
Oh, good. So how do they do that?
So they streamline that supplier evaluation process with those ready-made, or you can customize them, questionnaire templates.
Okay.
And then they have the automated scanning for digital assets, which is cool.
So you're not relying on, like, a PDF that's 6 months old
Exactly.
that they sent you.
Exactly. It's actually going out and looking.
That's good. And I know you mentioned customizing those risk scores. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so they let you customize supplier risk scores.
Okay.
So you can focus on the threats that are most relevant to your business.
So it's not just this generic one-size-fits-all.
Exactly, which is huge because every company's different.
Right.
And then you can assess vendors against frameworks like NIS2, GDPR, ISO 27001.
You stay ahead of all those regulations.
Exactly. And they have on-demand risk evaluations if you want to do a deep dive into a specific supplier or group of suppliers.
That's handy. So it's like if you're really concerned about a particular one, you can just, boom,
Exactly.
get the information.
Exactly, yeah. So you're not doing all this extra work if you don't need to.
Okay.
But what I thought was really cool is how Cyberangels talked about increasing visibility across your entire supplier network.
Right, because that's a big challenge, right?
It is because you're so reliant on them.
Yes.
But you don't necessarily know what's going on.
Right.
So they were saying that you can move from manually monitoring like a small number of suppliers to automating that oversight across your entire supplier list.
Wow, that would be a game changer for some companies.
Right.
Yeah,
Imagine the time savings.
seriously.
And it's not just that. The platform automatically sends out the right questionnaires based on, industry, segment, risk exposure, all of that.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. So you're not sending out a generic one to everyone. It's tailoring it. And it keeps all of your third parties in this central directory that's prioritized based on risk.
Oh, that's handy. So you know exactly where to focus your attention.
You know exactly where to focus. And we've talked about automation, we've talked about visibility.
Right.
But what about AI?
Right, because AI is a big buzzword these days, but how are they actually using it?
So Cyberangels uses AI to automatically generate those really detailed remediation plans that we mentioned. So it's not just like, here's a problem.
Yeah.
It's like, here's the problem and here's what you need to do to fix it.
Step by step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's providing continuous risk monitoring.
Okay.
So you have those immediate insights.
You're not waiting for something bad to happen.
Exactly. You can get ahead of it.
Yeah.
And then they also have real-time collaboration features, which I love.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Uh-huh.
I'm really interested in that aspect.
So suppliers can actually access the platform.
Okay.
They can view and complete assigned tasks, which I think is huge.
Yeah, because then they're involved.
They're involved. It's not just like, you're doing this wrong. It's
Right.
like, let's work together to fix this.
Right, it's partnership.
It's a partnership, and they can literally see their improvements in real time,
Oh, wow, that's cool.
which I think is motivating.
It is motivating. It's like that gamification of it almost.
Exactly. Like you're actually making progress. And by giving them those clear, guided steps,
Right.
it empowers them to actually lower their scores.
Right, so it's a win-win.
It's a win-win. And they have all their communication in one place.
Oh, that's nice. It's not all over the place.
Yeah, no more email chains.
Right.
It's all right there, which is great. And they were saying, Cyberangels, that they're really big on flexibility. So you can integrate your existing methodologies, your knowledge bases.
Okay.
They have pre-built integrations, APIs.
Okay.
So you're not locked in.
Right, you can use what you already have.
Exactly.
That's really good. What about data visibility? Is that something they address?
Yeah, so they were saying that you have granular control over who sees what,
Okay.
You can manage your entire company within a single instance, or
Okay.
you can do a multi-instance solution.
Okay.
So it's very flexible.
So they're really trying to be as adaptable as possible.
Exactly. They're really trying to meet the needs of different companies.
It sounds like it. So we talked about the platform, but who is Cyberangels, like, as a company? What's their story?
That's a good question. So they were actually only founded in 2021.
Oh, wow. They're relatively new.
Relatively new,
All right.
but they've seen a lot of growth.
Okay.
And they've got some pretty big-name incubators and partners backing them.
Oh, wow. So they've got some support.
Yeah, they're not just like a couple people in a garage.
Right.
They're legit,
Yeah.
and they're already working with over 1,600 companies.
Oh, wow. That's impressive for such a young company.
Right. And they have over 40 partners and resellers, and they've won 4 different awards and program recognitions.
Oh, wow. Internationally.
International.
That's a big deal. Okay, so they're not messing around.
No, they're not messing around. And they really seem to be onto something with this whole scalable business model.
Right. They're filling a need.
They're filling a need for sure. But I'm curious, how do they stack up against the competition?
Right, because there's a lot of other TPRM solutions out there.
There are. What makes them different?
Yeah.
So they did call out some of their competitors.
Okay, what do they say?
And they were saying that a lot of these other companies that are offering similar solutions
Yeah.
are really expensive.
Oh,
So Cyberangels is trying to be more cost-effective,
okay, so they're trying to make it more accessible.
more accessible to a wider range of businesses, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
What else? So they were also saying that a lot of these existing solutions out there are very focused on monitoring,
Okay.
and they're very focused on generating alerts.
Okay, which is helpful to a point,
Right.
but it's not a complete solution.
It's not the whole picture. And Cyberangels is saying, we're going beyond that.
Okay.
We're giving you the remediation plans.
So it's not just telling you what's wrong.
Exactly.
It's telling you how to fix it.
Exactly. So you're not just stuck with a problem.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What about flexibility? Because we talked about how important that is.
Yes. So that seems to be a big differentiator for them.
Okay.
They're saying that a lot of these international TPRM solutions, they're just not flexible.
Right.
They might work great for a company in one country, but if you're in a different country
Right.
with different
There's
regulations,
context.
it's not going to work.
It's not a good fit.
And they were specifically talking about the Italian market
Okay.
and how they've really tailored their approach.
So they're not just trying to shoehorn in
Yeah,
solution that wasn't made for that market.
right. It's not just about translating the language.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
about really understanding
The nuances.
the nuances, exactly. And then the other thing is integrating with existing systems, which can be a nightmare.
Oh,
It can be a deal breaker for a company.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't work with what you already have, then you're stuck.
Right. You have to start over.
Right.
So Cyberangels was saying that a lot of these TPRM solutions
Yeah.
require companies to invest in all this new expensive infrastructure.
Right.
And they're like, no, we work with what you have.
Okay, so they're trying to make it as easy as possible
Exactly.
to implement.
So they work with SAP Ariba, ServiceNow.
Okay.
They even work with Excel and SharePoint, which I thought was funny.
Well, hey, if that's what you're using.
If it works, it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're really meeting companies where they are.
Exactly. And that's huge because it reduces the cost, it makes it faster to implement, and companies can start seeing the benefits much quicker.
Which is ultimately what everybody wants.
Right, exactly. So it sounds like they have a really smart strategy.
They do. They've definitely done their homework.
They've done their homework. So what's next? What do we think? Big picture.
Well, I think it's safe to say that supplier risk management is not going away.
No, this is not a fad.
This is not a fad.
This is the future.
This is the future.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing is that it's no longer a niche concern.
Right.
It's a core business issue.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be integrated into every stage of that vendor lifecycle.
Right. It's not just an afterthought.
Exactly. And that NIS2 directive, that's just one example of regulations catching up to the reality.
Right, because it's a real problem.
It's a real problem. And I think we can expect to see even more stringent requirements in the future.
So it's no longer enough to just trust your suppliers.
No, you can't just assume they have it handled.
Right.
You need to be proactive. You need to have a plan.
And you need to use data.
Exactly. We've got to move beyond those manual processes.
Right. Ditch the spreadsheets.
Ditch the spreadsheets.
Mhm.
Embrace the technology.
Right, because that's where we're going.
That's where we're going.
Hmm.
And I think AI is going to play a huge role in that.
Yeah, we've seen how Cyberangel is using it.
Exactly. And it's only going to get more sophisticated.
Right. And more accessible, hopefully.
Hopefully, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not just about having a bigger budget.
Right.
It's about working smarter.
Working smarter. And this is important for everyone listening. If you're involved in vendor management at all,
Any part of it.
procurement, IT, security, legal,
Compliance.
you need to be aware of this. Don't wait for a crisis.
Exactly. Be proactive.
Be proactive. Ask those questions now.
Review those vendor contracts.
Understand what they're doing. Explore your options.
Exactly.
See what's out there.
Because the consequences of inaction are just too great.
It's too risky.
It's too risky.
Well, on that note,
Yeah.
we've spent a lot of time talking about, the threats out there, the vulnerabilities, the potential downsides of this whole third-party risk thing.
Yeah.
And while that's all important,
Right.
I think there's another side to this that's worth exploring.
Okay.
What if instead of just playing defense all the time,
Yeah.
we looked at TPRM as an opportunity
Okay.
to kind of build something better?
Okay. I like where you're going with this.
Right. So
what if?
what if instead of just
Yeah.
like policing our suppliers, we
Yes.
saw them as partners?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Partners in building something more resilient,
Okay.
more innovative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's not us versus them.
Right.
It's like we're all in this together
Exactly.
because we are at the end of the day,
We are.
especially in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just ticking boxes,
Yeah.
checking for compliance,
Right.
what if we use this whole TPRM process
Yeah.
to actually build a culture of shared responsibility?
Yeah.
Right? Where we're sharing best practices.
Right.
We're helping our suppliers improve their own security.
Right.
And ultimately, we're creating a much more secure
Yeah.
and collaborative ecosystem. I like that because it goes back to what we were saying about Cyberangels.
Exactly.
They're really big on that collaboration,
Yes.
giving suppliers access,
Yeah.
involving them in the process.
Yes.
It's not just about monitoring and control.
Right.
It's about empowering them
Exactly.
to actually make things better.
And when they feel empowered,
Yeah,
don't you think they're more likely to step up?
absolutely.
They're
And-
more likely to invest in their own security.
Yeah, they're not just going to do the bare minimum.
Exactly.
They're going to want to actually,
Right.
rise to the occasion.
Exactly. And then everybody benefits.
Exactly. It's a win-win
Right.
for everybody.
So as you're listening to this,
Yeah.
as you're thinking about your own TPRM journey,
Mm-hmm.
think about it this way.
Yeah.
Don't just focus on the negative.
Right.
Don't just focus on the threats.
Think about the opportunity.
Think about the opportunity.
Yeah.
How can you leverage TPRM to not only protect yourself,
Right.
to build something better?
Build a better future
Exactly.
for everyone together.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's our deep dive for today.
That was great.
I hope you found it helpful.
Very insightful.
The world of supplier risk management is constantly evolving.
Always changing.
So stay curious,
Stay informed.
stay proactive.
And until next time.
See you later.